Welcome to the Fly Culture Podcast, bringing you interviews, reviews and fishing tips. Here's your host, Pete Tigers.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Fly Culture Podcast. The birds are singing, the sun is out. We've had some rain over the weekend, but the river hasn't risen. I sort of put a switch rod in my car just in case, but the river hasn't really risen a great deal. The rain that we've had of late has had zero impact on the river. And I'm away from my home river from the tour today, and I'm catching up with friend of the podcast and author Wayne Thomas, and we're going to be fishing on the river today. We're actually on the Torridge, but Wayne, it's great to have you along. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you, Pete. It's good to be on the river with you. On the Torridge.
Absolutely. And I think congratulations are in order. You've been fishing at Chew recently and had a massive pike. How big was it?
38 pound. It was caught on the fly on Saturday. Quite a big stroke of luck, really, because we were due to go last Tuesday when it was baking hot. But unfortunately, one of the staff at Bristol Water contracted COVID, and they didn't have enough staff to run the boats. So they cancelled that day. And they offered us either the Friday or the Saturday. And my friend couldn't make the Friday, so we went for the Saturday. And as luck would have it, the Friday was one of the hottest days of the year, which wouldn't have been conducive to pike. But the Saturday appeared and it was overcast and quite a nice breeze blew up. And conditions were ideal. We ended up with 23 pike between us, topped with the fish of 38 pound, which was an awesome fish.
That's an extraordinary fish. And did you get a sense when you hooked into it that it was something special?
Yeah, it was the first take of the day, and it was just like someone had dropped a sack of teddies on the end of the rod. It was just solid, and it chugged around the boat several times. We had the drogue out, so I was a bit concerned, and it sort of did a lap of the boat right out around the back of the drogue, fortunately, because it had taken a fair bit of line, and then it just plodded around under the boat on a with lots of pressure on it. And when it popped up on the surface, we both just gasped at the size of it. And that wire tray suddenly becomes very thin, and you think, is that hook gonna hold? And fortunately, it just came in over the net, and there it was, fish of a lifetime.
It certainly is. I can only dream of something like that. And we're somewhere completely different today. As I mentioned, we're on the Torridge, which my home river, you'll know if you listen to the podcast, I talk a lot about the Tor. The Torridge really is the sister or brother river to the Tor. They meet very briefly in the estuaries, meet very briefly before heading out to sea at Barnstable Way at the moment. We're going to be fishing for trout. It looks fantastic, but can you tell us, Wayne, a little bit about the Torridge and a little bit about where we're fishing today as well?
Well, we're fishing at Little Warham Fishery, which is situated near Beeford, which I would suppose you'd term as Middle Torridge. It's a beautiful stretch of river, dense woodland each side of the river. With some further downriver, we've got some open arable fields. But yeah, it's a very peaceful stretch. And one of the beautiful things about the Torridge is that it's very wild in as much that there's no road or rail close to it. So it's very tranquil, very unspoilt. The Torridge, perhaps slightly different to the Tor in as much that there's always a slight tinge of colour with the Torridge, and it's got a very rich history, but a very different character to the Tor. I think every river has its own unique character, and I've been fishing on the Torridge now for probably 15 years, I would think, on a regular basis, because I rent a rod further downstream from here, and I normally fish for the salmon. But in recent years, the river has been so low during the summer that it seems a shame to focus on the salmon when they're just not there. And it's very productive to focus on the trout, because there is wonderful potential in the river with the brown trout throughout the river and occasional sea trout. So that's what we're going to try for today.
That's an interesting point you make there, Wayne, because we've got to be adaptable as anglers now, and particularly if you're a salmon and a trout angler, that we've got to deal with conditions where, this year we've, like the last few really, we've not had a lot of water to go at, so that you've got to be a little bit more adaptable. And it would be lovely to swing some flies for salmon here, but I'm really happy with how the river looks today. It looks really pretty, and I'm really looking forward to casting a few flies. I don't know the water so well, so we're probably going to have a little bit of a walk. I may well set up, as I'm sort of searching, I'm going to obviously try and see if I can find some rising fish, but just even in front of where we're standing right now, there's a little run that looks like it may have some nice potential for the duo as well. So I may start with the duo until I feel a little bit more familiar with the fishery and have had a look at it, but I'm kind of excited. So I guess that's why I mentioned the duo as well, that I want to go and fish the river and see if we can find a fish. So what we'll do throughout this podcast is keep you in touch. I'll try my best to describe the river. Wayne says it's middle river. Looking upstream, it's quite a wide river here. Just looking upstream in front of us, there's sort of, it runs down into what looks to me to be a deepish sort of pool. The river here is about, 30 feet across, possibly a little bit more, but the run I was talking about, the river's a fair bit wider, but it's got that more freestone look to it that looks shallower, and even, I'm looking right upstream and I can see the bottom of the river there, so it looks like it's going to be a nice mixture. I'm going to look in these deeper, more sheltered pools, see if we can find a fish or two rising as well, but if I'm going to search the water, I think I'll set up with a duo and see how we get on. We've just scrambled down the bank, which Wayne aptly described as the unofficial entrance into the river. We're sort of standing in it at the moment and trying to figure and work out a plan as to how to fish. We were saying there's a few bugs on the water. Actually, I'm looking across, I can see midges the far side. The water where we're standing in is not even really covering my boots at the moment, but it looks as though the bias of the pool runs down more so the far side. And it may be, and Wayne was just sort of saying, when you don't know a water so well, you're sort of trying to figure out and strategize how best to actually fish it. I can see towards the head there's sort of a couple of stones poking up, and I wonder if it is a little bit deeper around there. I'm sort of kind of keeping an eye out to see if there's anything rising. It doesn't look here now. We ignored the water I described earlier only because it looked incredibly shallow. The sun was all over it as well, so we thought we would leave that alone. This water's a little bit slower, so I would hope if anyone was going to rise, they would give us a little bit of a clue they're around. It may be the case that we do walk up a little bit further. I think I can see some broken, slightly faster water a little bit upstream. But what are you thinking, Wayne?
Yeah, it's a fascinating bit of water, and I think, as Pete says, it looks to be some deeper water up there. It's always fascinating reading a water, and when you're fishing with someone that you haven't fished with before, it's interesting to see how they see the water. Many years ago, I started fishing on a small stream in my home village, and I think you learn a lot from just a small river, and you just transfer that to a bigger river, and the places the fish lie are very often similar. And one of the nice things I like to do, sometimes you walk a stretch of river with someone who knows it well, and you sort of play the guessing game, and you listen to them and see where they say the fish lie. And it's always interesting if that corresponds with where you actually think they're going to lie.
Yeah, some good points there. And like I say, I've known Wayne a long, long time, but it's the first time that we've actually fished together. So it's going to be really fun to be able to do that. I thought I saw something move a little bit further up, but I guess, where we're standing is pretty shallow at the moment, and it looks to me like the run just comes across from us and hits the far side a little bit more, but we'll wait and see. Perhaps we're going to walk up a little bit further, see what we can find. So we've seen kingfishers, the birds are singing. I found some sweet water as well, which I'm going to go back to in a minute. But we've been joined by Anthony Wilmington, who is the owner of Little Wareham, and he can tell us just a little bit about the fishing here and what brought him here. But Anthony, it's been great to come along and cast a few flies. I was hoping to pop my cherry before we spoke to you, but it's a pretty sweet setup you've got here, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a lovely stretch of river. It's sort of 2 miles. It's all fly fishing here, and there's a good range of fish to catch. So you've got the wild browns, sea trout, and the salmon, and depending on the conditions, is how you approach the river.
And it's a beautiful setting, and you have, of course, accommodation as well. So does that mean that anglers can come buy a day ticket, but if they're looking from further afield as well, that they can come and stay here as well?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got the cottage which sleeps 4. Many choose to use that. We've also got a lovely pub in the village called the Globe, and that accommodates some of our guests just for one night. Or people, if they're not too far away, they just travel and fish for the day on a day ticket basis.
Great. And to get a sense, what brought you down here? Have you always been in the area, or how did you end up at Little Wareham?
It's a long story, really, but Amanda and I are originally from Dorset, and I was actually looking at buying a property in Scotland for the salmon fishing and the river fishing, and we decided that probably wasn't the best logistics for the company and other interests and family. So we sort of Amanda set about trying to find a property near a home that would provide some fishing, and by chance we discovered Little Wareham, which is probably one of the best things that we ever did.
And it sounds to me like you're a passionate angler too.
I absolutely adore angling. I mean, traditionally I was into my sea angling on the beaches and match fishing and that sort of thing. But I got introduced to river fishing probably about 15-20 years ago. A very good friend of mine, and once I caught my first salmon and sea trout and things, I never looked back.
And are you one of these people who lives on the river but doesn't get to fish it, or are you one of these people who loves to come down and fish whenever you possibly can?
My passion is for both, really. I mean, as you can see, there's a lot of work to do here, and I like anglers to have a good experience. So we like to keep the grass mown and the banks looked after, and keep the trees under control because it's tree lined and there's a lot of work to do. Luckily, I'm an arborist, so that sort of fits into place with some of the maintenance we do here. But most of it is passion based. It's not, it's not a financial gain from it. So we tend to just look after the river in the best way that we can.
That sounds fantastic. And I guess you must be one of these people who's sitting there one evening and it sort of niggles away at you and you think, actually, I'm going to have 10 minutes down on the river before I go to bed and perhaps chase a sea trout or two.
I often have those moments. I mean, it does, it is a balancing act here, living here, sort of a big property to look after and, Brooke and the family and other distractions as we all do in life. But this is, it draws me here quite often.
I can understand that. It's a beautiful part of the river. And as I said in the introduction, my home river's the Tor, so it's the brother or sister river of this river. And it's so nice to see something that I know a little bit about, but I want to see if I can catch a fish from here. And I'm really, really looking forward to it. And it is beautiful. It's one of those beautiful days. There's not many clouds in the sky, and it's just one of those lovely days. There's some midge hatching. Looks like there's some odd caddis as well. So I'm hopeful. The water I was talking before I spoke to Anthony is a little bit quicker, and I was trying to work that. It looked where I thought the water might be running, but actually this is one of the lovely things about not knowing the water. You sort of walk up the pool and think, that's going to be the spot, and then spend a couple of seconds looking, and then there was a lovely tree down and a flow in the shade against the bank that I wasn't thinking about, and then spotted that. So I've concentrated my efforts on that, and I'm going to do that a little bit more. But it's been lovely to meet you, Anthony. If people want to find out a little bit about the accommodation, about the fishing, where can they find you?
Yeah, well, the fishery is called Little Wareham Fishery, so we have our own website, and we're based in Beeford, so we're quite easy to find. So give us a call, look us up, and we'll see if we can get you organised for some fishing and accommodation.
Fantastic. Well, I'm going to have a wander back up to that pool and see what I can find, and we'll go from there. fished up through the run I was talking about, and it just looks right. I don't know if it is a little shallower here. River is quite wide here, and it's running over shallower area. It's more sort of freestony, really, in the way that it actually looks. But I was half expecting, I wasn't arrogant enough to expect I was going to catch fish there, but I thought there was a little bit of a chance there. So it was a little surprised, not surprised, but I felt that I was sort of in the game there. I was sort of varying. Again, it's one of these interesting things about not knowing the water, really, that I was sort of varying where I was casting, the areas that I was hitting, and varying the drifts, making sure I had some slack in there, all the sort of standard stuff. I'm kind of enjoying fishing the water a little bit as well. It's been kind of fun to do that. I've got a elk hair caddis as a dry, and I've got a redneck pheasant tail as the nymph. Not particularly big one, but hopefully will do the job okay. And I'm going to keep walking up the river. Wayne's spotted somewhere just downstream, so he's sort of setting up for that at the moment. But I'm going to keep walking upstream a little bit more. But I can't stress how beautiful it is. It's really, it's, like I say, it's one of those lovely days, lovely day for trout fishing. So our plan has been to, with the water being so low, is to, till we see some fish rising, is to fish more sort of towards the heads of pools with the duo, searching out, just trying to get a sense and a feel of the river. It's funny though, when you fish somewhere, I was just saying to Wayne as he wandered past me that you sort of compare it to your home river, and as I said, with these rivers being so close to each other, but it feels more like the Mole than the Tor to me. Which will mean not very much to many of you, but the Mole is one of the main tributaries of the Tor, and it kind of reminds me more of that than the main river. But that's just in my little world. But as I was walking up, it was wonderful to see Wayne's rod hooped over, and he had a fish on as well. So we're sort of getting there, aren't we? We're edging nearer.
Yeah, momentarily had a fish on. Took the nymph. It was very, very brief, but it was encouraging. I'm having one of those mornings at the moment where I've had one or two little tangles and haven't quite got into the rhythm of it yet, but it's a beautiful day, and I'm sure that's gonna come.
Well, I'm going to have a look at the next one up, or the one after that as well. But it's encouraging seeing that. And yeah, as I said, we're going to stick with this. We're just feeling our way along, and it's just nice to see that we've had a fish on the end of the line. So we'll keep working at that and see how we get on. We've just been walking along the river talking with Wayne, and there's some lovely angling literature that has been influenced and based around the Torridge. I'm sure you may have heard of some of them, but there's been a few books, hasn't there, Wayne?
Yeah, one of the most famous books is a book by Lemon Gray, The Torridge Fishery, which I think was around about the 1950s, and that tells about the stretch that he owned. And it's interesting looking back in the old literature, because you realise just how rich the river once was and the numbers of fish that used to run the river. And it's very complex, the story of how the fish have declined, but the health of the river has actually improved in recent years. There was a big creamery at Torrington, which I believe was guilty of some effluent discharge and various sewage works and that on the river. But recent years has seen the health of the river improve. Quite a lot of that is in Charles Innes's book, Torridge Reflections, which talks about how polluted the river was at one stage in the early 80s. But the health of the river has improved, but the runs of fish, I think as much as anything, down to the climate, because we've had such dry summers recently, we're just not seeing the fish come up.
And today's a classic example, well, I suppose it's a summer's day, but the rain that we'd had, this is Monday, and we'd had rain Saturday and Sunday, and I think Anthony said to us, it brought the river up an inch, and that was about it, and dropped straight back again. And it's been a path and a trend that seems to continue at the moment. And we were talking about the fishing hut, and there's a outline, I guess, on the roof of the hut from the 1930s. There's like many of these places, I'm sure, if you fish them, that if you're lucky enough to fish where there is a hut as well, which is always nice. But there's history in these places as well, and yeah, there's an outline of a salmon there, and it's quite an extraordinary story, isn't it, of how things used to be in those days, isn't it?
Yes, I mean, the outline of the salmon was 33 pound, and that relates to a date in 1927, and it records 6 fish caught between 10 o'clock and 1 o'clock for a total weight of 107 pound. That was in April. So such a catch these days would be unheard of, but it's sad what we've lost. If you go up by the house, there's a old cooler where they used to bring the salmon up and put them in the cooler. And the story is they used to have a horse and cart to bring the fish up from the river on a good day to store in the cooler. That's just, it's amazing what they used to be. And it would be lovely if we could get the rivers back to that.
Do you think we are at a tipping point? Have we gone too far? Is global warming an issue that's going to affect us? But have we gone too far? Or are these fish, we know and respect and love how resilient they actually are, but are we too far down the path now?
I don't like to be pessimistic, and I always like to think that there's hope. And as an angler, every new season you think this is going to be a better season, but I can't help but if I look back to when I started sort of fishing for salmon now, which is probably over 30 years ago, I've seen a dramatic decline, and if it continues to decline the way it has, I can well see salmon being extinct in the West Country within the next generation.
It's a frightening thought, isn't it? And, we're trying everything we can. There's still a lot more to be done, isn't there? And that's the worrying thing about it. But we're going to keep wandering along the river. It's just been wonderful to walk along there in a beautiful summer's day. As I said, it's the trout we're after. We've been looking for some rising fish as well, but we're going to have a walk, I think, and find another pool. So we walk downstream a little ways, and the river's a little different here. It's narrower, probably 15, 20, 25 foot across, and the pool's slightly more defined. And it's lovely when you see your fishing buddy walking downstream, and they look like they've got a little bit more of a spring in their step. Am I right?
Yes, that's right. I've had a nice little wild trout, about 8-9 inches long, which is very pleasing to get the first one of the day.
Absolutely, that's great stuff, Wayne. And there seems to be, with the pools being smaller, there's a little bit more tree cover. And where we were looking around, we were sort of poking around upstream, having a look around there, that because the river was so much wider, that the tree coverage wasn't as great, but it seems as though there's a little bit more down here. Although I'm looking downstream, the river widens a tiny little bit more, but that's great to see. And it's the duo. We've stuck with the plan. We've looked for rising fish. We thought we heard one and waited and saw nothing, but the duo seems to be the method just at the moment. I've been mixing stuff up a little bit, and I've replaced my dry fly with an indicator, made the distance, because it's quite rocky as well, the river, and I found that I was catching flies on rocks and bits and pieces like that. So my plan was, in super fast water, to go heavier, and then in where it's not as fast flowing, just go with a slightly lighter nymph as well. So we'll see what happens, but it's great to see Wayne's off the mark for us. Don't know if you're the same, but I'd sort of convinced myself I'd seen a fish rise. I don't know if it was or wasn't or not. Well, it turned out it probably wasn't, but I went, snipped everything off and put a dry fly on and gave it a go. There's a few more caddis on the water, so I thought it might be worth a look, but sadly nothing happened. And I was also thinking about, we talked about the state rivers and everything else, and as we were walking down a little bit further, we were talking about sea lampreys and, how they are a sign of water quality. And on Saturday, I think it was Saturday or Friday, I can't remember now, Friday, that I saw them on the river tour doing their thing. Extraordinary. I don't know if you've ever seen them. They're 2-3 foot long. And I think on the evolutionary scale, if you put sort of your little finger and your thumb as wide apart as they could go, and if we use that as the distance between man and dinosaurs, I remember seeing something a while back that then if you took sort of your other hand and doubled that in the same sort of measurement, that's somewhere around where sea lampreys are on that scale, that they predated dinosaurs by quite some way. I saw something years ago and it astounded me, but if you ever watch them or see them, they're quite a frightening creature to look at. They're all pretty much teeth, and they cut their heads by just picking up stone by stone by stone. They have the female with them, they mate, and they both die. And they look as though they probably haven't changed in many millions of years. But like I say, one of the things it got me thinking about was that, we talk about the state of water quality and everything else, but there are some glimmers sometimes. I know the background isn't great, but there are some glimmers sometimes, and seeing these amazing creatures still heading up the river and trying to do their thing perhaps is just a tiny little glimmer that we can use sometimes to make us feel a little bit better about the state of the rivers that we spend time around. So the shade's come over the river now, and it looks a slightly different place. I've seen the odd fish rise, so I'm going to snip off my nymph. I've had a small one at the back of a pool. I think it was the same pool that Wayne had his out of. We've split up a little bit. He's stayed downstream a little bit, and I've tried to see if I can cover some water, see what I can find. But yeah, where there's a bit of shade, I'm seeing the odd rise. Not consistent, but the odd rise. So I just went back, got a drink of water. I'm going to walk back downstream because I saw it's deeper, slower water, and it looks the right sort of place for some rising fish. Where I'm standing now, I saw a fish go once. I can't get into the river here though, so it's going to be a bit of a slide down. So I'm going to try and find somewhere where I can get in and then try and walk my way back up the river looking for some rising fish. So I made a relatively long walk downstream. Access here, because it's flat water, I guess from a salmon perspective, you might want to fish some of it with bigger water, but I've walked back upstream again and I saw a fish rise. I'm going to wait, see if he goes again. I've not seen him go for a bit. It's just where the shade starts on the pool. It's a long, long pool. As far as I can see, it's just flat, slow water. So I'm hoping, even if this guy doesn't come again, that there might be another fish a little bit further up I can have a look at. But I'm going to wait this one out, see if he comes and rises, and see if we get lucky. Perseverance eventually pays off. It took about 4, 5, 6 fly changes. I rose the fish. Wayne was watching from the bank and it didn't stick. And then I got another shot at it and it didn't stick. And then I moved position and then eventually it gave me a go. And I managed to hook and land the fish, which I'm really, really pleased about. I don't know if it was the fish had turned on the fly and I was just, I was letting him eat it. I thought I was just setting on it, but it just didn't stick. It was just one of those things. But moving position, I don't know if that gave me a better drift on the fish. And it ate it, and I got a nice hook up this time and managed to land the fish. And that's been a lovely way to end the day. I'd sort of spent a lot of time, probably a good 40 minutes on that fish at least, and eventually got there. So I'm really, really pleased about that. This is now, we're sort of having a wander back. It might be one of those ones that probably later in the evening the fish may come on a little bit more, but it's a beautiful fishery. It's well cared for and loved. You can feel that about the place, and it's been really, really lovely to, I think I've caught salmon and sea trout on the Torridge, but I can't recall catching trout on it. So I may have popped my cherry for Torridge trout. So I'm really, really pleased about that. We're just walking along. Wayne spotted a fish rising, and we were sort of thinking about packing up for the day, but we're going to watch a little bit longer. But it's been great fishing with you today, Wayne. It's been really cool. It's not been one of the easiest days. I don't know if everything was a little unsettled with the rain that we'd had and everything else, but it's been a really cool day, hasn't it?
Been a fantastic day's fishing. Really enjoyed it. Scenery is fantastic. Woods right down to the river. Yeah, beautiful day.
Are we going to watch and see if this fish rises again and perhaps have a go at it before we go?
Yep, might just have one or two last casts.
That sounds perfect to me. I've just seen another one rise as well. So thank you as always for listening to the Fly Culture podcast. I hope you've enjoyed this day on the water. We've obviously caught some fish, which has been fantastic, but it's been great to spend time on the water, and I hope you've enjoyed this one. So tune in for some more. There'll be some more very, very soon.
The Fly Culture podcast is brought to you in association with Fly Culture, a quarterly print magazine. For more information, please visit flyculturemag.com. You can also find Fly Culture on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter.